So you've got a plan to come to Italy. It might be for a 1-week vacation, it might be next year, this month, or you might be planning to move here. Whatever the case, I'm going to give you an essential guide, just a couple of words for the beginners and some advanced phrases for the people who've been studying Italian for many years. It's incredible how just one word or one phrase that you memorize, and maybe you only know this one phrase and you memorize it and for your whole trip, but that phrase could be something that will get a smile out of a local and will have them realizing that you are someone who is kind and culturally aware. I watch tourists and I hear Italians speaking about them and saying how disrespectful they can appear. You can just give them that little insight into your personality with one word or one phrase that shows that you have good manners, then that can change everything. And suddenly you find yourself experiencing the real Italy, which I guess is always the goal. So let's begin with a very easy one. If you're coming through the airport or in a train and there's crowds, and let's face it, if you are traveling in high season, like right now, you are going to find lots of crowds and with your suitcase perhaps, and you want to get through the crowds, but not just to steamroll people and be rude like that. So I think the best word to say is permesso. Permesso, and it sort of, you can translate it as permission. Think of it as that permission. You're getting permission to come through. But instead of saying sorry or excuse me, we might say in English, permesso is basically like you're coming through and you're asking permission to come through. And people use the word permesso even if you enter someone's home. So if you go into someone's home, I mean, even if we have like a builder or a plumber come and he's coming into our house, when he steps through the doorway, he will say permesso. And the reason is it's like asking permission to enter your space. And it's a lovely word because it's quite easy to say and it's so useful. You can use it just in the street. For example, going in line for the bathroom and you walk just in front of someone, you say permesso. Or if you're actually really stressing out and you're sweating and you're trying to pull your suitcase over cobblestone and some people are in the way, and you can just say very loudly permesso, and that means that they won't get annoyed at you. They'll move out of the way and all will be good. If you have trouble with your apartment or your hotel room or wherever you're staying, or perhaps you're just going up to a group of people and they're deep in conversation and you're just going to interrupt them, the best thing to say, and which you'll hear 1,000 times a day in Italy, is scusi il disturbo. Disturbo. Okay, so you're asking to say sorry for the interruption or sorry for this disturbance. If you think disturbo, disturbance. Okay, so what basically this is the most polite way, and as you'll probably know, in Italian, which we don't have in English, you have a polite version of saying things, and then you have a casual, colloquial way of saying things. Always use the polite, I believe. Generally, they say, even if you get to know people, if they're older than you, you should, out of respect, you should use the polite version, which is the lei, L-E-I. Basically, if you're a traveler in Italy, everyone you encounter, if you use the polite version, they can then correct you and say, oh, don't worry, we can use the tu.
So an example of the difference is tu, you say scusa for excuse me or sorry, and the lei is scusi for excuse me or sorry. I find it's always respectful to begin by using the lei and then wait for the Italian to give you the permission to use the tu. So they might say to you, possiamo darci del tu. Possiamo darci del tu. You don't need to remember this phrase, but just be familiar with it if you hear it, because what they're basically saying is, we can give each other the tu, which means that, don't worry, you don't have to use the formal, polite Italian with me.
It's very hard for English speakers to get their head around because it doesn't exist, that distinction in English. You see the difference. If you go into a conversation and you're starting with the polite, that just instantly gets an Italian in a good mood because they're seeing that you're coming with respect. I'm Australian, so much like the British and the Canadians, we tend to apologize a lot, but I find it is very appreciated by Italians. Sometimes in a crowded street or on a train, I might step too close to someone and they may say to me, "Scusi signora" or "Scusi signorina," which means "excuse me, ma'am." To which I will reply, "No, mi scusi lei." No, mi scusi lei, which means "no, I'm sorry," or literally "no, ma'am" or "sir, please excuse me," as I'm the one who trod on your foot or got in your way. And I tend to use this a lot. I think it works. I mean, oftentimes if you are walking through a busy street, it's not clear whose fault it was, and I just like to be polite and say "no, mi scusi lei." You might be calling your Airbnb host and it's very difficult on the telephone, so you probably want to speak in English, but if you just start the conversation with "Scusi disturbo," then it instantly relaxes them and they're much more likely to help you or to accommodate you if you're asking, "Oh, I'm sorry, we've missed our train," or "Can we check in late?" or something. If you just start off the whole dialogue by acknowledging that you are interrupting their day with this phone call, then I find the results are always far more positive. If you wanted to do the plural, so perhaps you're walking up to a group of people, perhaps you're just trying to find something in a town and you're walking up to two people who are talking, scusate il disturbo, because the scusi is just for the polite, just talking to one singular person. Scusate is for speaking to multiple people. Scusate il disturbo. Scusate il disturbo. Another situation in which this is very, very useful, perhaps you've got kids, you're traveling on a train and they're screaming, or they've just poured their drink over someone and it's got onto them, or perhaps they're just scrambling around and people are sort of looking at you and you feel a bit embarrassed. So then you can just say "Scusate il disturbo," "Scusate il disturbo," or just "Scusate." So that's just speaking to everyone around you, to the whole train, apologizing to the whole train. A lot of the time we might think of saying sorry, which you would say in English, which would be mi dispiace, but that's I think it's much more common to just say "scusate," which is "excuse me." Scusate or scusi you can also use if you're trying to get someone's attention. So if you're in a restaurant, you might want to call the waiter over and you can just say "scusi," or if the two waiters are talking, "scusate," you asking for the bill or you're just asking to be served. And so scusi and scusate are very, very useful words. There's a phrase that you might hear which you'll translate and it will come up as "today is a party" or "tomorrow is a party," and you might think, what does this mean? People are telling me tomorrow is a party. It doesn't mean it's a party. They might say domani è festa, or oggi è festa. But actually what it means is tomorrow or today is a public holiday where everything will be shut and everything, you really need to know about this in advance, because you go out to the supermarket and you're thinking, why is the supermarket closed? And everyone's saying party, party. Another word you might hear, unfortunately, I hope you don't hear it, is sciopero. Sciopero is strike. So you might be wondering, where are all the taxis? Sciopero. Why are the trains not running? Sciopero. Okay, let's talk about your accommodation. If you're staying in a rental apartment, they may have left you the key somewhere, or they may give you the key, or they may talk to you about passing over the key. So the key is la chiave. La chiave. This can be a tiny bit of a tricky one because you're used to seeing that, okay, right, if it's feminine, it ends in A in the singular and it goes to E in the plural. So you're used to, for example, la donna, the woman, becomes le donne, the women. But then when you have one of these exceptions like la chiave, you think it's feminine, but it's already an E. How do I get it into the plural? So the answer is that it just goes to I. Le chiavi, le chiavi, le chiavi. La chiave, le chiavi. Now, the owner of an apartment is called the proprietario or proprietaria if it's in the feminine. So you may not be dealing with, you may be just dealing with someone who's dropping off the key, and they may say, "Oh, non sono il proprietario, I'm not the owner." So they may just be the person who's letting you in, and that sometimes I think can be confusing for people if you're sort of asking them all these things and they're saying, "Look, I'm literally just the person who's dropping off the key." Perhaps there is something in your apartment or your hotel room or something that doesn't work, and the two words you just need to remember is non, it doesn't, funziona, doesn't work, non funziona. Or if you want to be a little bit more polite, you could just say, come funziona, how does it work? So you might just be here in the heat of summer and your air conditioning doesn't work and you're on the phone to the proprietario, the owner. You say, "Scusi il disturbo, come funziona il forno, the oven, or il frigo, the fridge?" So you might want the password for the Wi-Fi in your home or in the hotel or anywhere, actually, even on the train. And I find that when people say, "Oh, what is the password?" In English, you would say "what is," but you don't use "what." You say "which" in Italian, which can be a little bit confusing for some. So instead of, you wouldn't say cos'è la password. You would say qual è. Qual is which. Qual è la password per il Wi-Fi? Qual è la password per il Wi-Fi? And instead of saying Wi-Fi, what's the password for the Wi-Fi? Wi-Fi. Qual è la password per il Wi-Fi? Qual è la password per il Wi-Fi? Per favore, please. Another way to say this could be, or perhaps if you're texting a message to the owner, could be potrei avere, could I have, the conditional potrei, could I have, potrei avere la password per il Wi-Fi. Now, one thing that can be very rude in Italy is if you just barge in like a tourist and go up to the counter and start speaking to someone, and actually there are all these locals who are waiting in line, but you may not realize they're waiting in line because Italians tend to just scatter themselves out and they start chatting and they go off, and some of them sit down, some of them are off in a little cluster. And so what I find is really useful is to just ask if someone is in the queue, if there's someone is in line in the queue, and this is always polite because there are so many lines in Italy for everything, for the greengrocer, in the bank, in the airport, whatever, and it's always just polite to ask someone, "Oh, are you waiting in the queue?" before you go ahead and either join the queue or go up to the line. Another reason is because even in the supermarket, and when you wait to get your the delicatessen, for example, there is often a line and you don't realize there is a line. So you want to ask someone just to be sure, because otherwise you're there and you think, "Oh, he's just serving this person and then he'll serve me." No, there's probably like all these other women they've just gone off to get their fruit while they're waiting, but they're actually in the line, and so you want to just clarify with everyone around you. The best, most polite way to say this is è in fila, è in fila. Fila is line, and in this case, you'd be using the polite. Okay, so the polite is lei, è, but if you just use è, it's assumed that you don't, the lei, I mean, you can use it, you don't have to use it. It's just assumed that you're talking to the person that you're making eye contact with in the polite Italian. So, è in fila, lei è in fila. Or another way to say it, you could say, "Scusi, excuse me, sta facendo, are you doing, la fila, the line? Are you doing the line? Are you waiting in line, basically? Scusi, sta facendo la fila? Scusi, sta facendo la fila? Lei in fila?" And then they'll say, no, I'm just here gas bagging with someone. Or they'll say, sì. Or they will actually say, prego, go ahead of me. Maybe they're gossiping with someone, so they will say, prego, go ahead. And that's just a lovely way to to make sure that you don't have a whole group of Italians suddenly start screaming at you and saying, what are you doing, just barging in and cutting the line. They don't like it when people cut the line. A distinction you might like to remember is that there is a difference with the word rent. So if you rent a house, it's or a room, it's affittare, affittare. And if you rent a car, vehicle, it's noleggiare, noleggiare. So affittare, noleggiare. Noleggiare una macchina, affittare un appartamento. The thing about scusi, scusate, scusa, it changes depending on who you're talking to, okay? So I'm talking to my husband, I'd say scusa. I'm talking to an elderly lady, I would say scusi. I'm talking to two policemen, I would say scusate. But if you just want to remember one thing so that you don't have to make that distinction because it's too much to remember, you could just say chiedo scusa, chiedo scusa. Chiedo is I ask, okay? I ask. Scusa, I ask to be excused, okay? So it's a good one just because it can you can use it in many different situations without changing it according to who you're speaking to. If you're really sorry and something has happened, you got the time wrong and the person is waiting up for you to open up the apartment and it's really late and you just want to say, mi dispiace, mi dispiace. Mi dispiace. But if it's really humiliating and you're so ashamed and you just really want to ask forgiveness, you say sono mortificato. Or if you're a female, sono mortificata. Sono mortificata. You might be thinking, why is it that when you say sono mortificato, it changes depending on your gender? So sono mortificata because I'm a female. But then when I say scusi, scusate, it's changing depending on the person I'm speaking to. And the answer to that is because with scusi, scusate, you're asking them to excuse you. So you're talking about them and that's why it's changing. Whereas when I'm saying I'm mortified, it's not involving them, it's involving me, and that's why the ending of it is feminine because I am a female. And whereas if I was speaking to multiple people, I would say scusate because I'm asking all of them to excuse me. Okay, let's talk about not having an altercation with your taxi driver. I have to say, I've never really been ripped off by a taxi driver. I've never had any negative experience, but I have had some friends who have, so in Italy. So look, let's say most of them are very kind, very honest, but it just might help you to have a few phrases just to make you feel like a little bit more confident that he's not taking the long way round or he's not going to overcharge you. Generally, most airports have a fixed price from the airport to the city centre. So the city centre is centro, or sometimes centro storico, which is the historic centre. So if you'll see with a price listed, often it will just have centro, and that will be getting you into the centre of town. You might want to say, how much is it to the centre? Quanto costa andare in centro? How much is it to the airport? Quant'è per l'aeroporto? Quant'è is just abbreviated from quanto, how much is it? È. Quanto è. But quant'è is what you'll probably hear. So it's a lot more common to just hear quant'è. How much would it be to get to the station? Quanto sarebbe per la stazione? Quanto sarebbe per la stazione? Or you might just use the name of the station. Quant'è per Termini? Quant'è per Termini? Quant'è per Termini? Quant'è per Santa Maria Novella? Quanto costa andare in centro? Quanto costa andare in centro? Quant'è per l'aeroporto? Quant'è per l'aeroporto? Be aware of your pronunciation of the word for, per. Okay, because you might see it per, and you might think per because it exists in English, and this is, I find, always tricky. When a word exists or is very similar to a word we have in English, people think, I can say it, and they don't change the pronunciation enough. But instead of saying per, if you're Australian or English, per, or if you're American, per, you want to say per. Giusto, amore? Per. 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 You might want to get an idea of if you can afford it. I always like to know in advance before I just hop in a taxi how much it's going to be. And you might ask them, and they might just say, I can't say, or dipende dal traffico. Dipende, it depends, on traffico, dipende dal traffico, it depends on the traffic. But then we're trying to lock them in to say, okay, more or less how much will cover it. You might want to say, look, would 20 euro cover it? Would 20 euro be sufficient? And that would sound like 20 euro. Don't say euro like we say in English. Euro. 20 euro sarebbero sufficienti. Now, sarebbero, don't worry about it. It's just the conditional. So it's would they. Now, why are you using plural? In English, we would say, is 20 euro enough? Okay, is the singular, but it's in Italian it would be are they enough? Are they and you think, oh, that's bizarre, but it's because technically 20 euro, there are 20 of them, so they're multiple, so you need to use the plural because it's not the singular. So singular of would is sarebbe, and the plural of would is sarebbero. 20 euro sarebbero sufficienti. Sufficient is sufficiente, and then at the end we have to change it to I because it's plural, so sufficienti. 20 euro sarebbero sufficienti. I don't want to speak ill of taxi drivers. Look, as I've said, I've had very good experiences, but I have to say so many times their EFTPOS machine is not working. And look, some people say that this is just a little scam so that then you have to pay in cash. But look, oftentimes there are just things don't work in Italy. Technology often doesn't work in Italy. So you'll get to the end of your journey and then they'll say, oh, it doesn't work. And you say, well, I haven't got any cash. And then you're like, oh, I'll take you to an ATM. And then you're like, oh my gosh, now they have to take you to an ATM. Then you have to get out and you may not want to withdraw money at that point. So it can be a little bit of a hassle, in which case I like to say, before I even get in the taxi, posso pagare con la carta? Posso, can I, pagare, pay, with la carta, which is assumed la carta di credito, which is the whole thing, but la carta, you can just say, posso pagare con la carta? And this means that they have the obligation to tell you in advance before you get into their car if their EFTPOS machine is not working, or for those who are a little bit cheeky and just want to get paid in cash, it means that they know that, okay, you're not planning, you won't accept paying in cash, and therefore they need to tell you up front. The word for cash is in contanti, in cash, in contanti. At most airports, there is a fixed price, and this would sound like tarifa fissa, so a fixed tariff, or prezzo fisso, a fixed price. So you see that if you're a beginner in Italian, just the ends change, so that because it's feminine and masculine, so the word tarifa is feminine, so fisso becomes fissa, tarifa fissa. Prezzo is masculine, price is masculine, so prezzo becomes fisso, prezzo fisso. I think I've said this one in a language lesson before, but it's so useful. Look, everywhere you go, you want to be saying gentile, gentile. This is kind, okay? And the reason you want to be saying gentile is it's so wonderful because you don't have to change it to the masculine or the feminine. It just applies to everyone, gentile. Unless you want to go over the top, as Italians tend to do, and say, gentilissimo, gentilissima, gentilissimi. If you can just say molto gentile. So if someone does anything for you, if they help you with your suitcase, getting down, or when you're about to get off your stop at the train, you can say, molto gentile, so kind, so kind. You don't need to say you're so kind because that will just get complicated. But you could just, just molto gentile. Or if someone, I don't know, they see that you've got children and they bring you some crayons and some paper for your children in a restaurant, and they bring them for them to play with. Molto gentile, grazie, molto gentile. with molto gentile, it's also something that you can use with in the polite, in the casual, colloquial, whatever. It's just very, very easy to use with everyone that you encounter. What if you're late? Well, good news, you're in Italy, so no one cares. No, they look. It's. I mean, my Italian husband is always saying, "Oh, 15 minutes is you don't even have to apologize for it," because it's just standard. If you're late for your restaurant booking, or I don't know, you're late checking in to your apartment, you might want to say "Scusi" or "Scusate il ritardo." Okay, excuse me for the lateness. I guess it would be il ritardo. In English, when we're late, we say, sorry, I'm late, sorry, we're late. In Italian, they say, sorry for the lateness, the tardiness, the delay. So they don't make it about them, they make it about the lateness. So just remember that. And so you would say, scusi or scusate, excuse il ritardo, the lateness. Scusate il ritardo. Scusate il ritardo. Okay? So ritardo, you have to sort of roll that R. Scusi il ritardo. Now, if someone gives you a little gift or a bottle of wine or something, perhaps because you've made friends or it's just the owner of the apartment and they've also put out a lovely thing of, they've brought you some fruit or they've brought you some olive oil or something, and you might want to say, oh, you shouldn't have, and which is a very polite thing to say also in English, and that would sound like non dovevi or non doveva or non dovevate. You might at this stage, if they're bringing you a gift, you might be on sort of you might be on informal terms. So you might say non dovevi or non doveva for the lei, non dovevate for the plural, and it's basically saying, you see that comes from the word dovere, to should, and you're putting it in the past. You shouldn't have. Do you know what's really lovely about Italy is that if you've gone to some effort and you're just looking nice in your outfit, no matter what age you're at, people will say to you, gosh, you look great, or you're looking lovely. But it's sort of, if it's just a stranger saying it to you, they would just say complimenti, so compliments. And it's a nice way, it's not too intimate. They're just admiring you from across the street or in a cafe or something. Oh, complimenti, and maybe they like your shoes or they like your dress or whatever. But you know what? You get these compliments from women as well as men. It's not rude. They're not coming on to you. It's not some sort of perverted thing. It's just someone appreciating that you've made an effort and they like the way you're dressed. And so it's you can have someone just say to you, complimenti, and you have that just, I mean, I'm riding my bicycle past and they just say, complimenti, or maybe they'll say, complimenti about your children. Maybe they'll say, what lovely children you have, complimenti.
Complimenti, you could also say, perhaps if you walked past a beautiful vintage car and you saw the owner and you just sort of gestured towards the car and said complimenti, just as if to say compliments, I approve of the car, it's a beautiful car. Or if a friend made a cake and you tried it, it was delicious, and then you said complimenti. So compliments on such a delicious cake. Or even if perhaps you saw someone's house and they just renovated it and you walked around and then you said complimenti on the renovation. It's really just a little word that Italians use frequently as praise, as a show of approval, as a show of appreciating beauty, often of all kinds.
When you go into a store or a patisserie or anywhere really, you want to greet the person when you enter their space, and even if it's a market. And you don't say ciao, it's too colloquial. You don't say salve, even that's a little bit intimate. But you just want to start with a very formal and pleasant buongiorno, okay, good morning. And I've said this before, but you can say that up until, I don't know, until mid-afternoon even sometimes, and then from the afternoon you will say buonasera. So maybe the store opens up, they're closed between 1 and 4, and then or 5 p.m. or something, and you go in at 5 p.m. and you think, oh, it's not evening yet, but no, you can still say buonasera, buonasera. The polite thing to do is just to greet them as soon as you walk through the door. Buongiorno, buonasera. I was trying to think how I could help you, because if you haven't understood what someone said and you want them to repeat it or speak slower, but even that in itself, like saying that phrase, could you please speak slower, or could you please repeat that, it's quite hard to remember if you're just starting out in Italian. And something that's easy, that doesn't have any R's that you have to roll, is di nuovo, again. Could you say that again? Di nuovo, scusi? Di nuovo, scusi? And I think that's it's helpful, because sometimes you can't even remember the phrase for could you repeat that, or could you speak slower, and so di nuovo is quite simple and quite easy to pronounce. Di nuovo, scusi, di nuovo per favore, scusi, di nuovo, scusi, di nuovo per favore. When someone is showing you through somewhere, they might be a guide, they might be the apartment owner, they might say prego, which means please go ahead of me. And prego is lovely because it can mean please, but it sort of means go ahead, prego. Also, when in a shop or a waiter, he might say prego, like go ahead, tell me your order, prego. And so you might be familiar with prego as being like you're welcome. So grazie, prego, which is another way to use it. But this is something that people will say even if perhaps you're going through a train and someone's in front of you, but a very kind gentleman might say to you, prego, please go ahead of me if you're a female, or if you've got children, or you're pregnant or something. Prego, go ahead. If someone is showing you through somewhere, it's polite for them to say prego and you go ahead. But if they're showing you through, sometimes what they will say is, I'll lead the way, faccio strada, which means I do the road, literally. But what they mean is, I'll go ahead of you. And it's the polite way of them saying, forgive me for going ahead, but I'm going to lead the way through the rooms, or through the gallery, or whatever, wherever they're leading you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope you will believe me when I say good manners will get you far, especially in Italy. People really appreciate good manners, and so many times I've been asked, how did you end up at that place, that party, that setting, how did you end up meeting all these people? And the answer is because no, it's not some young guy trying to pick up a foreign girl. These are families, these are elderly women, these are just kind shop owners or restaurant owners or apartment owners who just really respond well when they see that you're respectful, and so I do believe in the power of good manners, and I think, judging by this community that we have here, you all seem to believe in that too. So thank you for watching. Good luck in being polite, and enjoy your next time in Italy. Alla prossima.